Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Ben Lack, and I'm the founder and CEO of Interrupt Media. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, but while we wait on everybody to join, we've already got quite a handful of folks that are already on the line, and so I'm always curious to know where people are based, since this is a virtual session. So if you wouldn't mind in your chat box or question box, typing in your name, where you're from, and maybe something interesting about yourself, or maybe something that you want to learn from today's webinar that you can take back to your business. Would be great to say hi to you, and it's always, again, fun to find out who's joining us. So we have Rob joining us from Buffalo. Rob, thanks so much for being with us today. Amber is joining us from Dallas, Texas. Hi, Amber. Thanks for joining us. There's a guy named Kate and Leslie are joining us from Miami, Florida. Hello, hello, hello. Hope you guys are enjoying the weather down there. I'm actually based in San Francisco and staying in Mill Valley, which is just on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. I am, self-isolating and making sure that I don't catch COVID, but I hope that everybody is staying safe right now. I wanted to quickly give a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Number one, the session is being recorded. So if you want to, take a listen to anything specific that I speak about, certainly feel free to take advantage of the recording. We'll also make the slides available to you as well. Also, we're going to set aside some time for you to ask questions to me regarding webinars and demand gen in general. So if you already have those, I know I sent an email to everybody a little bit earlier today. Certainly feel free to pose those questions in the question box so that we can address as many as possible. Finally, there's a 5-question survey at the very end of the webinar that I would appreciate you filling out. It just gives us really good feedback to understand what about the webinar was useful, what could we have provided more information on, what other topics could we present in future webinars, and are there other ways that we may be able to support your business. So before I get started, just want to say hello to a few other people. David is joining us from Chicago. Stephen is joining us from Cincinnati, Ohio. Stephen, thanks for being with us today. Jordan is joining us from San Francisco. Jordan, thanks so much for being with us. And if you are just joining right now, would love for you to chat in the question box your name, your city, and anything else that you may want to chat my way. That'd be really fun. So we're going to get started in just a few moments. Let a couple more people join us, but certainly feel free to chime in. Callie is joining us from Houston, Texas. Callie, thanks for being with us. And Gazelle is joining us from San Francisco. So we got quite a few folks today, and I'm excited to share a lot of information about how to conduct webinars. So we're going to get started in about 30 seconds. And Madison from Orange County, really great to have you being with us today. Amber, there's another Amber in Dallas. So wow, 2 Ambers in Dallas. That's pretty great. So I'm going to go silent for 30 seconds, and then I'll get started. All right. Hello, everybody. If you're just joining us, my name is Ben. I'm the founder and CEO of Interrupt Media, and I'm so thankful to have you joining me today. I'm going to be going over a lot of wonderful tips and tricks about how to leverage webinars for your business while you're trying to deal with this uncertain time. For those of you that don't know me, I have spent the last 15 years in the digital marketing space. I have worked on many startups, with many startups and small businesses, also large mid-market and enterprise companies, helping them drive more pipeline to their business. I'm also an investor and advisor to many companies, and I help businesses as well as my team try to figure out the right way to help you generate leads, pipeline, and ultimately revenue. But one of my favorite tactics to use in terms of driving demand is using webinars. And I've been lucky enough to moderate or present on hundreds of webinars throughout my career. And for my clients, we've been able to generate thousands of leads and millions and dollars of pipeline, because there's just certain things that need to be done when you're running a webinar program to ensure that you're getting the most out of the effort. I've also spoken at larger conferences that you may have heard of before. I've participated at events like South by Southwest, which is an event in Austin, Texas, Dreamforce, which is an event that Salesforce puts on every year in the Bay Area, and then KM World, which is a well-known media publisher that covers a lot of different industries. And then when I'm not working, I do like to play music. I am the band leader of a New Orleans-style brass band called the Brass Animals. We used to be the team band for the Oakland Raiders, and we've traveled around the country playing all sorts of second-line music and popular music. So that's the non-work thing for me. Quick background on the business. Excuse me. We're about 8 years old. We have a team of a little over 30 folks servicing multiple clients. I think we're at 23 or 24 clients today, all over the country and all over the world. And our three big offerings as a services business are demand generation, content marketing, and sales operations. So my job for you today is to really try to go through as much of the learnings as I can give you about webinars and help you really get a sense of why webinars are so great at creating leads, where to host these types of webinars, how to repurpose content from other campaigns, whether they're events or other campaigns that you're running to leverage in a webinar, and some tips and tricks for promoting and get the most out of the activity. So this is going to be a really jam-packed session with lots of helpful stuff, so I'm going to go fairly quickly. But before I get started, I want to ask everybody to fill in a poll question that should be popping up on your screen right now, which is how many webinars do you currently run per quarter? And if you can just tell us right now whether that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 2 or 3, 4 to 6, or 7 or more, then that's great. And then I can kind of get a better sense of the room in terms of how mature are people's webinar programs. Another quick tip, if you're not running polls today in your own webinar, is you should definitely run polls. Polls are fantastic to get really useful insights about the people that are joining. You want to usually have a multiple choice question of 3 to 5 answers. You want to fill the space for at least 30 seconds, but hopefully 60 seconds, because you want as many people to vote on the answers as possible. So I can tell you right now that the poll has been going for 56 seconds, and 91% of you have already registered the poll, which is fantastic, because when we now close the poll and show you the results, not only are the results super interesting, but they're also really useful data points for you to leverage when you're looking at the results and actually trying to see how you could tailor these insights for your follow-up sequences with sales or your marketing sequences in email. And what we can see here is that a third of you don't run any webinars right now, so this is going to be a really useful session for helping you how to get started. But the vast majority of you are at least doing anywhere from 2 to 7 webinars a quarter. So I'm going to go with basically 1 a month, maybe 2 a month, maybe 3 a month. We have clients that maybe do anywhere from 1 to 4 a month. So if you're at the 0 mark, that's totally okay. If you're doing a lot more than that, then that's great. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to give you some additional tips and hacks to get more out of what you're already doing. All right, so I want to talk to what everybody I'm sure, joined the session to learn more about, which is basically the current landscape today. And with coronavirus really impacting so many industries all over the world, businesses are throwing out their marketing plans and really having to cut back and be a lot more vigilant with how they spend money. And so that probably makes life for you a lot more difficult because your business may or may not be considered an essential product or service to the clients that you're trying to sell to. So if I take my demand gen hat off for 1 second and I put my product marketing hat on for one moment, the question that I think everybody should be asking themselves right now is, what's essential for my business, and how can I help companies who are asking themselves the same question and already doing those cuts? How can I convince them that my product or service is absolutely essential? And if you're able to be honest with yourself about how your product or service is essential for your business or for your customers' businesses, that may mean you have to tailor your product or service. That may mean you have to tailor the way you go to market. That may mean you have to start selling to different segments of your customer base or new segments of customers that you may not have sold to before. But I think it's an exercise that every business should be running today to really ask this question: is how is my product or service essential for my clients, and how do I communicate that in the right way? Now, as it relates to marketing, the one thing that's essential to making marketing work is having demand generation. And that is so incredibly important, because if you're not currently driving leads today, then you can't convert into pipeline. And yes, lots of businesses today don't have very large marketing departments, and they're reliant more on really strong sales teams. And you can get by in many climates with just having a sales team. But the advantage of having a demand generation function within your business is that it allows you to get even more out of your sales team, because there are lots of different things that marketing can do that sales that they can take off of sales' plate in a scalable, cost-effective way. And so there's lots of channels on the demand gen side that obviously a lot of you are probably investing right now in, like in paid ads and events and content and SEO and that sort of thing. But I really want to make the argument for why webinars are something for a third of you that you should be considering strongly, and for those that are already doing lots of webinars, why you should be doing even more. So if you're in the B2B space, you're selling to B2B, this is a really interesting stat from GoToWebinar, which is the tool we're using today, that says that 73% of B2B marketers and sales leaders are using webinars to generate high quality leads. And there's really good reasons why. Number one, if you're able to make a good enough argument to get a specific prospect to give you 30 to 60 minutes of their time, that's a pretty great opportunity to really make a good impression. In addition, webinars typically have anywhere from 35 to 40% of folks that register actually attend. It's another signal for you to know that the topics you're covering are things that your audience and prospects want to learn more about. And even better, 20 to 40% of those webinar attendees end up turning into qualified leads. And for many of you who have really strong sales teams, or maybe not as built out of a marketing function, you know that being able to drive an additional 20 to 40% of qualified leads, if executed correctly, is a massive, massive order of magnitude level of support that you can now throw to your sales team and help them work more deals and close them faster. In addition, webinars are really cost effective to run. In most cases, if you're running it yourself, webinar software is very cost effective, and I'll speak to that in a minute. The actual execution of the content is a little more costly, depending on whether you outsource that work or handle that work yourself. But really, you can decide on how much you want to spend. This number, $100 to $3,000, it really, most of that money is really towards the promotion, because of the resources that you can already leverage in-house. And we have other tips that I'm going to share with you throughout this session to give you ideas of how to get even more out of your investment. You can spend more than $3,000 on a webinar. If you don't have the resources or the bandwidth today to do this yourself, you can obviously go out and hire groups like us, or partner with media or publishers or trade associations and do sponsored webinars for thousands of dollars to get them to handle all the logistics and promotion, and you just become a subject matter expert on the webinar. But really based off of other types of demand generation programs, much like events, the average investment and the amount of work that's actually done to execute a webinar is a very small percentage of what it would actually cost to sponsor an event, become a presenter, deal with the booth, put together all the content, and try to get butts in seats. So webinars don't necessarily just have to be geared towards net new prospects. There really can also be an opportunity for you to leverage the attention of your existing customer base to upsell and cross-sell. For folks right now, especially in the climate that we have today, it's less expensive to upsell an existing customer than it is to acquire a new customer. That statement is true across the board. Because you've already built that relationship, you're already providing a product or service, and so the ability for you to then upsell those clients is just much easier than for a group that has never heard of you before. So you can leverage a webinar strategy today if you don't have webinars and say, hey, look, I've got enough customers today. I want to make sure that I don't lose them through this trying time. I'm going to do thought leadership sessions to keep them as customers, or I'm going to use them to build the brand and showcase my expertise on other products or services that they may want to take advantage of in trying times like this. And what you can also do is, even once you produce this webinar, there's so many pieces of content that you can leverage to repurpose in other ways, whether it's announcements that you're doing on webinars that you can repurpose in emails, whether it's demos of your new product or service to other folks in videos, or turning this PowerPoint deck into a series of blog posts or some type of op-ed, or if you're presenting research, you can leverage that in other ways as well. And so I'll be speaking to how to repurpose content in a minute, but I do want to kind of make sure that as you're listening to this presentation, that you're not just thinking about how to use webinars for driving net new prospects into your funnel, but also thinking about how to leverage webinars for your existing customer base. And again, as I said, you can use this for your sales cycle, your marketing funnel. You can also put it in your website, and infographics is another one that I forgot to mention that I think is worth speaking to. So that's the frame. This is why you really should be giving webinars a hard look. And for those of you who already have a really robust webinar program, you should be giving a hard look to running webinars for your customer base. And if you are, I would love to speak with you offline and to learn a little bit more about how you're doing that, because I think we have a lot of really good tips for also the upsell, cross-sell strategies as well. So I want to take a quick step back and just talk to you guys about the very first webinar that I ran, which was almost 10 years ago now. And it was with a company called O-Power. I was brought on. O-Power is a company that was bought by Oracle in 2016, but before they IPO'd in 2014, they were a private business that sold customer engagement software to utilities all over the world. And because we have a lot of folks in Texas, TXU, NRG Energy, folks in New York, Constellation, anybody in Baltimore Gas and Electric, for the folks that are in Northern California, Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California, Southern Cal Edison, those were all customers and are customers of O-Power. And my responsibility was to run digital marketing for O-Power globally, and which meant that I had to support not only North America, EMEA, APAC, and also Latin America. And O-Power sells enterprise software, so their average contract value is in the 7 to 8 figures per year, and the sales cycle is anywhere from 12 to 24 months. And so one of their key strategies in terms of really trying to move people through the sales cycle and get them through the funnel faster was to push thought leadership webinars. And so when I was brought on, they didn't have a webinar program at all. And my ask was to find subject matter experts within the business and in other parts of the industry, partner with them, and produce thought leadership to, again, prospects and existing customers about ways to engage with folks that pay their electric bill, which is everybody on this webinar, and educate those utility professionals on how to be able to educate their customers on how to consume less energy in their homes. And what we found was that there was a lot of solid engagement because there's just this void of knowledge with how to really engage with residential customers in the right way as a utility. And so all of the webinars we did were structured around the analytics that the company had around trends in behavior of residential customers, and thought leadership in regards to how to think about certain strategies at a senior level for how you should be engaging those customers through multiple types of communication channels that you can see on this screen. And once I finally did my first webinar, I will tell you I was terrified because I actually had to speak on the webinar and present. And it was, at least for me, doing this by myself, a decent amount of work. But once I was able to get my first one done, I was absolutely hooked because I just realized how many questions were being asked, how much great feedback we were getting from clients and prospects, and I knew that we needed to do these more. And so fast forward to today, the business IPO'd in 2014. It got bought by Oracle, like I said, and doing these 2 to 4 webinars every month was really a critical driver to influencing multiple opportunities that O-Power ended up winning. So I want that gives you a little bit of an opportunity now to kind of think about, reflect on kind of what you're doing today. And for those that don't have webinar programs, I want you to engage with me right now. I want you in your chat box or in your question box. I want you to tell me what the biggest struggle is that you're dealing with right now, and I want to just kind of comment on 1 or 2 of the things that people are chiming in. Katie actually had sent an email to me earlier today when I sent the email out this morning, saying that one of the biggest struggles that she's challenged with right now is email sequences. And so I want to go ahead and kind of tease up the fact that email can be a really good promotional tool for you to drive registrations. And I'll have some tips in just a moment on what you can do to drive email registrations. But regardless of how big or small your list is, you can very cost effectively drive a lot of registrants via email. And so that's a perfect example of if we really get into the details about how are you thinking about your promotional plan, I think that, again, we can really help you drive more registrants and attendees to the webinar. Now, I'm going to continue to go and answer some of the questions that are coming or comments into the chat box at the end, but I do want to kind of walk through 8 reasons why companies talk themselves out of doing webinars. And I think for the folks that don't do webinars today, this list is going to be really useful for you because I'm sure that at least 1 or more of these are very applicable. And for the folks that are doing quite a few of these, be patient a little bit. There's going to be a lot of good insights for why I'm going to make the argument for you should be doing more, but I'm also going to drop in a lot of different tips and tricks for how you can leverage what you're doing today. So myth number 1 is that people don't have time to attend this stuff. And you may think that hard economic times like we're dealing with right now means that they're too busy to do this, and I say I disagree. I don't care if folks have to deal with their day-to-day jobs, their kids, they're trying to get exercise, or they're all social distancing. The fact of the matter is, regardless of whether we're in a situation like we're in now or if things go back to normal, if you provide enough value to your audience or your prospect then they're going to give you time. And so my suggestion, in order to make the argument that it's worth their time, is to just populate tons of strategy, hacks, tricks, and/or research into a session like this. And I am showing you guys as I go through this whole thing, all the things that I'm recommending to you we're doing as of today, we're doing in this webinar today, to kind of give you an example of how you could be doing this for yourself. The second myth is that you don't have anything to say. And that's the easiest one to debunk, because you're in business today to solve a certain problem for a certain set of customers. And the reason why you're able to solve that problem for your customers is because you know how to solve that problem better than they do, or they just don't have the expertise to figure it out yourself. And I don't care if you're not the smartest person or don't have the most experience in your specific industry. At the end of the day, you definitely have enough to say about your subject matter expertise, or something to say to your customer base, and you should say it and get it out as far and wide as you can, because that's great for promotion, it's great for branding, and it helps people. And you're in your business today because you want to help people, and you should be pushing that expertise out as far and wide so that you can really create most of your impact. Now, one of the things that a lot of companies struggle with is, I may have something to say, but I don't know how to take advantage, put it all together. And so one of the things that I want to suggest for a lot of folks that have been relying heavily on events, your event channel, is repurpose all the event stuff that you created for events for webinars. And putting it very simply, webinars are virtual events. So there's not a big difference. You may not have the booth. You may not have the big, sign on the, behind you. I'm doing this from my bedroom right now. But the reality is that you can certainly repurpose the live presentation and slides and convert that into a webinar. You can take all of the booth collateral that you have and make that stuff digital for sending emails after the fact or during your pre-webinar sequence to get people to better understand your products and services and why they should join the webinar. You can put those links in the chat box to help people click to it as you're actually doing a session. For any video work or animations or demos, you could totally run all that stuff in a live session or on a landing page as a thank you confirmation page to help get visibility into that work. For the booth graphics, you can use all that stuff in your PowerPoint presentations, repurpose it on landing pages. You could create infographics with some of that stuff to leverage the same messaging. And then for even, let's say a bunch of you bought a ton of booth swag, whether it's the stress balls or other sunglasses or t-shirts or stuff like that, use that stuff to incentivize people to show up, or send it to folks as a thank you for registering or attending. It may take a little bit longer to get things through the mail today, but clients are always appreciative of and prospects are always appreciative of when they get stuff in the mail, and it's a good excuse to get them to think about you in a little bit of a different way. And hey, maybe put a little personalized thank you note or some type of personalized message with the booth swag and say, really appreciate you registering or attending, and want you to take advantage of this webinar session, or would love to talk to you. But if you're not thinking about how to repurpose webinar event content, here's some other ideas for how you could convert existing content into a webinar. So we're actually doing this today, where I wrote a blog post many months ago about ways to create more effective webinars. And so I converted this blog post into the webinar you're listening to today, and then added a lot more hacks and tricks to the session. You can absolutely, very naturally, take an ebook or a white paper, convert it into PowerPoint slides, and use that in a presentation. If any of you are investing in podcasts, turn that, you've already got the audio ready to go, just make some slides and let it run. If you're short on content, go to a site like Quora or Reddit or some kind of industry forum, and go get a list of all the most popular questions that people are asking right now, and create answers put all those in slides, there's your webinar presentation. Very easy to do. Go look at what your competitors are doing. If you have competitors that are bigger than you, likely that they're investing in content and sessions, go see what they're doing and repurpose. Use what I like to call the skyscraper effect, which is basically a skyscraper has this big foundation and then you build on top of it. So take the competitor's content, identify what you like about it, and then build on top of it by making something better, either with unique perspective or more tips or more advice, so that it's just even better than what the competition is already doing. And for folks that have a really good sense of the types of industry trades or publications or podcasts that support your industry, go see what they're covering. I mean, their job is to do nothing but create content all day long that's relevant and useful for people at the right time. Go piggyback off of something that they've built and turn it into, again, leverage the skyscraper effect to turn it into something that you want to make into your own type of webinar. So those are some ideas that I think that are really easy, again, for you to convert into webinar content. Now, many of you know that if you're going to run a webinar, you got to have a PowerPoint presentation so that you can get through things fairly quickly. And a lot of us just don't have the expertise or the interest or patience or want to actually do this. So option one is get someone else to do it. Either have somebody on your team, design person, marketer, do it, hire an agency like us. We're happy to build that kind of stuff for you, or just get into it, deal with it. Canva is a great tool to use, very easy to use and building PowerPoints, but you just need to have something. And what you can do is over time iterate on how you build these things. We use a PowerPoint deck template so that, again, it's really easy to just kind of repurpose from webinar to webinar, even if topics are different. If you're repurposing content, taking headlines from certain paragraphs or images from ebooks or white papers and copying and pasting that stuff onto slides certainly helps you save the time so that you're not having to start from scratch. And then in terms of the talk track, again, re-leverage the content or just write an outline and then for every section of the outline, make 1 or 2 slides. All right, the fourth myth, I'm not a good presenter or I don't like presenting. This probably applies to quite a few of you. And what I would say is, if you're too nervous to present, go find a different subject matter expert or somebody who's more comfortable with presenting in scenarios like this at your company. But I would really challenge you to try to do this yourself, because I think that it's a confidence builder. And again, when I did my first webinar at O-Power, I was pretty terrified. I got no sleep the night before. My heart was racing. I was very, very nervous. I didn't want to mess up. But after hundreds of webinars and being on stage and playing with the band, I've just gotten very used to being in this kind of a setting. And quite frankly, I now really enjoy doing stuff like this. And I think for folks that of you who have not yet gotten a lot of reps, you may find that you like it. But if you don't, definitely outsource it to one of your colleagues who can help you, or sponsor a publisher's or media company's webinar and have them help you with it. But here, just a couple of presentation best practices. If you do want to tackle this yourself, make sure you introduce yourself at the beginning so people know, why you're saying that you're a subject matter expert. Be really clear on the problem that you're trying to identify and talk through. Don't just say that you're the person that thinks this. Use third-party quotes or stats to validate that other people feel the same way. You got to be extremely detailed in how you're presenting the solution so that people can take not only the strategy away with them, but also some really tactical tips for how to get started, because that's always the biggest struggle. Use case studies to validate that the tactics that you're recommending actually work for other clients, because there's so many different ways that people can make things successful. You want to make an offer at the end of every single webinar you ever do. And if you're not deliberate with this, for those that are already running webinars today, I really think that this is something that you should be giving a lot of thought to. And then you've got to end with a call to action. Hopefully the content you're presenting is engaging and motivating enough to get somebody jazzed to performing that call to action. But definitely would end with a call to action. You're here to drive leads in business. Take advantage of the audience that's here talking to you. So I want to go deep just for a second on the offer. And there's 3 strategies for how to do this. You can give attendees something away for free, which is one of the most common ways that people do stuff in webinars. They're giving away content for free. They're giving away an assessment for free. They may be giving you special access to new products or services, which if you have a new product or service coming out soon, definitely do that, because that gives you really easy audience to get feedback on your beta product or service. You can give exclusive access to webinars and thought leadership or specific events. If you're, not running a webinar program today that targets your existing customer base, this is an awesome one to do, because they're already paying you money. You just want to keep adding value and giving yourself that opportunity to upsell and cross-sell those folks. And so again, we can provide you more guidance on how to execute these things more, but assessments, ebooks, blogs, checklists, VIP access to certain things, that's definitely a way to go if you want to do something for free. If you don't want to do something for free, then you want to sell something for either an extremely low cost or for a bigger ticket item. You want to have a pretty big discount. Now, the reason why you would make an offer that's a cost is because, at least for a low cost, is because the only goal you're trying to have here is to get folks to spend some kind of money with you. It really doesn't matter what it is. It can be $3, it can be $7, it can be $19. We recommend under 99 bucks. And you want to make this offer just an absolute no-brainer. But the goal is that you're going to drive a lot of volume, and it's going to give you a lot of opportunity to then upsell, cross-sell, and build bigger relationships with companies. Maybe you offer some type of a subscription service, or your product you want them to buy more of, and so you say, hey, I've got this widget that I'm going to sell you, and it usually costs this, but on this webinar, I'm going to let you have the first one for $3. And that's the way for them to try it at a low cost, and if they like it, then they start buying at retail over and over and over and over and over again. That's a great strategy to think about. For folks that have bigger ticket products or services that you sell, the low-cost way is certainly one way to do it. Or you could just go straight for the big ask. And what you want to do if you're going to sell a big ticket item right on a webinar, you got to make it under $1,000. Nobody is going to have authority unless you're the CEO or SVP of a business to drop in a credit card purchase for $1,000 without talking to folks. And when it gets to be that kind of a price point, you have to think about it. It's a lot of money. Am I really doing this in the right way? Is it really worth it? I may need to talk to other people about, is it worth it? And so you want to make it, big enough to make whatever you're trying to sell, enough money for you to offset ad costs or make revenue for the business. But you also want to be able to find a way to make sure that this is actually a palatable thing. And so the best way to make this as intriguing as possible is to do at least a 50% discount of whatever you're offering. But my recommendation is, to the extent that you can, try to get to 60, 70% off, because the sweeter the deal, the better chances you're going to have for taking advantage of it. So when you're doing webinars, you really need to make sure that your strategy around what that offer is real clear, because again, the session is all about taking a captivated audience and converting them not just from leads, but into potential pipeline or revenue. Okay, so now we've talked about how to make the offer. It's now time to talk about some promotional stuff. So many of you, regardless of whether you're doing a ton of webinars right now or you don't have any webinars in the queue today, are probably thinking my list isn't good enough. And for all of the clients that I've ever worked with, every single one of my clients and companies that I've talked to, I've always identified that their database could always be better. And so this is done, and the reason is for twofold. Number one, there's certain strategies and processes that you as a business should be taking to always improve the database health of your company. There's always more prospects and segments that you can get, not just through traditional marketing channels, but through third-party services or through just doing research and like finding contact information. But there's also tons of folks that you can be adding to marketing campaigns. So that's one. You've got to have a really good and clean database. Number two is you've got to have the tools to be able to help you execute this webinar well. And if you have lists of any kind, you need to be able to leverage it. And so using some type of marketing automation tool, whether it's Pardot or HubSpot or Marketo, SharpSpring, Eloqua, Autopilot, even if you're using Constant Contact or MailChimp, you need to leverage that to help you build the list. But many of these tools can also help you create event landing pages, give you the registration form. They can trigger automated follow-up emails for folks who fill out forms and for people after you've joined and attended a webinar. They can update your CRM so that your sales team can figure out who's registered and who's attended and what meetings are happening and who's following up on what leads and that sort of thing. And that also allows you to grade and qualify those leads for sales opportunities. How many of these people, are really going to be folks that we can sell to today versus not? And so there's a couple of tips that I want to talk to you about how to build out your list. And I'm a big fan of pushing, at least on the non-email side, pushing through social media, either organically by just typing in tweets or Facebook posts or LinkedIn updates of being like, hey, here's what's going on with our webinar, date, value proposition, and that sort of thing, or running ads. Katie also asked before the webinar about LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn in the B2B webinar for B2B webinars because it's extremely tailored to your target audience. And so I want to give just a couple of quick points, and then if you want more insight into LinkedIn, certainly feel free to reach out to me offline and we can have a deeper dive. But number one is I've seen for webinars the cost per lead be as low as $25 and the cost per lead be as high as $175 for webinar registrations. It's typically done with sponsored updates and in-mail. In-mail is really effective for event-based marketing outreach. So if you are doing something in the event space, when that comes back, definitely leverage in-mail for outreach to inviting people to sessions. But for virtual events and webinars, in-mail is really effective because you're writing this personalized email to a targeted person and like trying to get them to join the webinar. For the sponsored updates, you want to make sure that you have at least 4 ad creatives running at all times so that it gives you the very most frequency, opportunity to run as much frequency and impressions as you can through the LinkedIn service because LinkedIn only runs your ad every 6 hours. In addition to that, being able to run 4 creatives also gives you really good insight into which ads and creatives convert registrants. And so you want to very quickly kill the ones that are underperforming, put in new ones, and that helps you lower your cost per acquisition. But the reason why the range of $25 to $125 per registrant is the kind of benchmark that you want to shoot for, not just on LinkedIn, but for many of these other paid program or social media platforms, is because it all is dictated on how big your audience is that you're targeting, and then how senior the leadership is that you're trying to target as well. If you're trying to get a manager to show up to a webinar, a manager is probably going to have more time and be more willing to join something because they're a manager level. But if you're really trying to get a C-level person to join a webinar, chances are you're going to have a really hard time to do it unless they're a smaller business. And even if they're at the VP or SVP level, depending on the business side and their day-to-day, again, you're asking folks for 30 to 60 minutes of their time. And so it may just cost more to be able to drive that type of person to a webinar session. So as you're thinking about how you're promoting and what your goals are for the webinar, it certainly is great to have a huge number of registrants, but what's more important is to really having those registrants be targeted. So if it means that you have to spend a little bit more to have a smaller, more high qualified list of registrants showing up, and then you're investing to make sure that they attend, then you're really setting yourself up for success. On the email side, you really want to make sure you nurture folks and create an email campaign that you can send to contacts and have a follow-up sequence for after the webinar. So for the pre-webinar, we suggest at least 4 emails, 2 weeks before, 1 week before, 1 day before, and the day of. And many of you got all of our emails that we sent 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks before, 1 week before, the day before, and today. And after the webinar, you will be getting at least 4 emails from us tomorrow, the day after, and 2 next week, because we'll be making this offer and we want you to be able to take advantage of it. And so if you have more time than 2 weeks to promote, then great, throw in more emails, either long to stretch it out, or 2 days before the webinar or 3 days before the webinar. But if you're really crunched for time, then we recommend at least 4 minimum, so that you can really give yourself enough chances to register. Keep in mind, open rates for emails can be anywhere from 10 to 30%. So if you only send it once, 10% or 30% of your list is only going to be the ones that see it, and then a percentage of those people are going to register. So if you send it 2, 3, or 4 times, you're giving yourself, the chance to at least hit everybody once, just from sheer frequency, to see what your offer message is. And if there's folks that actually see the emails multiple times, that's good frequency, because again, it's showing you're delivering in those additional messages, additional value, why they should really show up, or why they should really take the offer, and that gives you the better chance to raise your registration list. So if you need to build lists, and promotion through social media is something you're doing or choosing not to do, I would definitely suggest using somebody like us to help you identify companies and accounts, and we can build contact lists for you with name, title, email, company name, and you can use those for cold emails. That's a really easy process and fairly cost-effective thing to do. But another really great strategy to take advantage of is to partner with another company. Many of you have partners today. Many of you have relationships with influencers. Many of you, have lots and lots of customers. Many of you have relationships with trade associations. Go reach out to those companies and get them to join and co-market a webinar and co-present on a webinar with you. This cuts down the amount of work that you have to do. You can take advantage of all the promotion and outreach that they do. And in most cases, your list is going to be a lot different than their list that they're sending out for promotion. So now you'll be able to get visibility onto a whole new audience of people that you wouldn't have necessarily been able to take advantage of if you've just done it yourself. And it's a lot more cost effective, and if successful, really builds a lot deeper relationships with those partners, because you're partnering with those companies or organizations to broaden your awareness, to grab more customers. And if you can help your customers be their customers, and they can help their customers be your customers, then the partnership is really being successful, and it means that it's worth investing more in those partners. So there's a case study that I'm going to speak to in just a minute that gives you an example of a company that really invests heavily into this. But I would say that this is something that you guys really should think pretty seriously about leveraging, if for nothing else, to limit the amount of work that it takes to run a webinar. And even though I'm doing this webinar by myself, and we do lots of webinars that are just us, we partner with lots of other companies to do co-branded, co-presented webinars, because it's just better for the ecosystem. And again, it gives us more awareness and leads that we wouldn't have otherwise had. Okay, myth number 6, you're going to get bored on this webinar. Well, I really hope that you're not bored yet. I hope that so far you've gotten a lot of really good engagement and learnings and thought leadership from the session. But here's a list of things that I would give you right now that you can do very easily to boost not only the attendance, but also the engagement once the webinar is done. I gave you the survey one where you give yourself 50 to 60 seconds. Make sure you have a really engaging tone. This is something that I've practiced over and over and over again. If you were on the webinar early, you heard me saying hi to a lot of people and asking you to give us your name and where you're based. Not only is that a great way for you to, type into the chat box, so now you know how to use the chat box, or your prospects now know how to use the chat box to ask questions or anything like that, but they also feel comfortable because they just got recognized. And being recognized in a setting like this is very unusual. And if you now have the confidence that, I'm going to say hi to Amber, or I'm going to say hi to Matt, or I'm going to say hi to somebody else, then they're more likely to engage. That's just straight to it. And so in addition to sending the emails that I sent before the webinar to try to get you guys to give me questions, and then make this offer at the end to keep you engaged, to see what the offer is at the end of the webinar, those are a lot of the tips. One thing that we see most companies do or not do that we absolutely strongly recommend you take advantage of is run an encore webinar 48 to 72 hours after. A lot of people aren't able to make today's session because stuff came up last minute, and we want to give them another opportunity to attend. Because if we just send them the on-demand recording, the chances are they may not look at it. But if we can actually tell them another time and say, hey, we're going to do this again on Thursday or Friday and follow up emails, then even if it's just a handful of additional folks, that's that many more attendees. Maybe it's 10, 20, 30, 40% more attendees that you've now gotten from this webinar that you can just go engage your messaging with and try to convert them again. And another great way to repurpose what you've already done to just do it again. So if you're running a bunch of webinars today, I would definitely advise you to run your webinars for Tuesdays and Wednesdays so that you can run encore sessions on Thursdays and Fridays. All right, last tip. You're not technologically savvy. That's okay. Fortunately, there's lots of webinar tools and video conferencing software that you can take advantage of. Here's just a few things to consider when choosing software. If your webinar, if you're trying to get hundreds and hundreds of people, then needing to make sure that you have a platform that can allow for that is something you need to consider. But if you're trying to do something that's a smaller number where you maybe will let people speak and unmute folks and be a lot more engaging, that's also going to impact it. How the hosts are being handled is important, how people can chat and engage with you. How much things cost is obviously going to be a big driver to which tool that you pick. The truth is you can't go wrong with any of these listed here, or even any of these listed here, although I will say that for these, for Google Hangouts and Zoom and Skype, Zoom is fantastic. I love it. We use it a lot for client meetings and such. I actually prefer the GoToWebinar or WebEx for running webinars. But if you're going to do Google Hangouts or Skype to run webinars, just know that if you have a lot of people joining, it's going to be the bandwidth is going to get a little tricky. So you likely want to use one of the previous tools, but you can get by with any of those. And so the final myth that I'm going to give you today that I want to debunk is that for many of you, I'm sure you're thinking, I don't have time. This hasn't been a priority for me yet because I haven't seen the value. I just don't have the bandwidth. It sounds too complicated. And I just want to say to you, that's baloney. There are so many resources to help get you started. I'm hopeful that today's session has given you a bunch of really good thoughts for how to do this better yourself or to get started. But this is the very quick down and dirty checklist. Pick your topic, get your speakers, whether it's one or multiple, pick your date, write your abstract. Get your abstract live on a landing page as quickly as you can, then finalize the promotion plan, build the presentation. You got to practice. I've run this webinar to my team, to friends, to my brother a few times already. So I've been able to kind of think about what I do want to say here or not want to say there. It makes the nerves a lot calmer when you actually do this for real, and then run the webinar and send your follow-up sequences. I would say that roughly, if you're doing this for the first time, you want to give yourself 6 weeks. This is the layout of how to take advantage of all the different milestones that you need to do, from finalizing the topic and getting the abstract written to your promotion plan and how you build the deck. I want to really strongly push and advise that the most important thing is getting the abstract live, because a lot of people say, well, I want to get my deck and I want to figure it out and really figure out what I want to say. You can figure all that out after you've started your promotions. And especially if you're running on a timeline, you just got to get that registration page up ASAP so that you can start sending emails out. Repurpose the abstract for emails if you need to just get something out the door to start driving registrants. But typically, if you're doing this for the first time, it's going to take you about 6 weeks. If you have advanced or experienced folks that have produced webinars before, either on your team or you're working with a company like us, we can likely get it done in 3 weeks or less. And that's just because we've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, so we know just how quickly to get things done. We've got lots of templates that help us save a lot of time, and so that's certainly very helpful. So what I just want to say to you is, don't stress. This is an extremely doable exercise and program that you should be running today, or should be doing more today. And lots of companies have been really successful in doing this. So C Prime is a consulting firm who gets a ton of pipeline from webinars. They actually really rely heavily on partnering with companies. So they have a lot of software tools that they resell. And so they do webinars with all those software companies once or twice a year. They're also, they've got relationships with lots of different trade associations that they do 1 or 2 webinars a year with. And because there's so many use cases that they support for all different types of industries, there's just plenty to say. And so being able to, again, partner with companies has allowed them to get anywhere from 200 to 400 attendees per webinar, but they're really averaging around, I've seen over 1,000 registrants that they've gotten now. And even though they've been running webinars for many, many, many years, they continue to invest in this because the partner marketing of webinars has just been really effective. Another really good success story is Reciprocity. They sell software to information security teams. They invested heavily in a list. They actually hired our team to go after and get all the contact information for all their targets, and get contact title, email, name, and company for their segment. And they started sending emails out pushing thought leadership. It's no different than what we did for many of you who have never heard of us before and got that very first email saying, what is this? And they average over 100 registrants per webinar right now, which is really great for them. They've been running webinars for 2 years. And on the low end, they'll do, like 1 webinar a month in like November, December timeframe just because of holidays. But usually throughout the year, they're doing anywhere from 2 to 4 webinars. And they're not only focused on trying to drive net new leads into the pipeline, but they're also creating upsell opportunities for existing customers. And so they're leveraging a lot of templates and such that we provided them, and leveraging many of the tips and tricks that we're sharing with today. And so hopefully this gives you a couple of examples in addition to the O-Power story of how this is really totally possible. So I want to make an offer to you today that I want you to give a hard consideration to. And this is, we put together a webinar prep package that we put together that we want to offer to you at a really big discount. And so what you're going to get with this package, if you choose to move forward with us, is a webinar checklist that's a little more detailed out than what I had in the slide. Email sequence copy for like a template so that you already have basically Mad Lib emails that you can drop certain things in to have emails ready to go for promotion, and then also designs. We've also got landing page copy and templates that you can take advantage of, ad copy tips. We're going to send you a webinar follow-up email sequence template. There was a script that I've written for the beginning of the webinar and for the end of this webinar that you can take advantage of. I'm going to give you a 1-hour coaching call, which I bill out at $200. And during that call, we're going to spend a little bit of time learning about your business, what you're experts in, and the goal of the call is to come up with a handful of webinar ideas that you can execute on, and who potentially would be the subject matter experts that we could take advantage of within your company or that you're partnered with to get all that knowledge from. And then we're going to schedule another session with that subject matter expert and have somebody on my team interview that subject matter expert for an hour, asking them all sorts of questions about the topics that we ultimately land on as the one we want to prioritize. And what will come out of that conversation is not only the abstract that you can now repurpose for landing pages and emails and that sort of stuff, but also one thought leadership blog post that will be really geared towards trying to drive people to the webinar. And so this is a ton of work. It's a lot of value here. It typically, when all is said and done, would charge almost $1,600 to do this, but we're offering it to you for $490, which is a savings of almost 70% and a discount of $1,100. We're making this available for only 1 week and only to the people that are registering for today's session. And of the 490, if you choose to move forward with this and you want our help, 50% of the 490 is going to go to feedingamerica.org. This is a fantastic organization that works with food banks all over the country to provide food to the folks that are less fortunate. They have a really robust coronavirus initiative right now, and we want to do our part and have you help us do our part by donating 50% of anything that gets sold over the next week to Feeding America. So if you have heard a lot of good value and support today from me, and you think that this could really be a useful value proposition for your business, we would really appreciate you purchasing this by emailing marketing@interruptmedia.com. We'll work on the payments for folks that are interested, either send you an invoice or work on PayPal or some type of credit card, and then we'll send you everything here and get the coaching call scheduled and the time with one of your subject matter experts scheduled, so we can help you get going. So I'm gonna really appreciate everybody sticking around. I know we're just a touch over the hour, but I am gonna spend just a couple of minutes asking a couple of questions that have come through, and so I want to go ahead and get a few of those answered right now. And then if you, again, want to take advantage of this, please reach out. If there's other questions, terrific. And we'll go ahead and jump into some Q&A. So Sam asked, what metrics should I use to determine if the webinar was successful? So great question. There's a couple of things that you want to consider. Obviously, registrants is going to be really important, as will attendees. We actually like to look at the registrant and attendee list and identify the percentage of registrants and attendees that we would call a marketing qualified lead, which is somebody that is, within the buyer personas or the target verticals or titles that you're looking for. So that percentage of MQLs to registrants is a metric that I don't think people look at that much, but we recommend you take a look at. And that's kind of the high level thinking about it from a funnel perspective. Really, at the end of the day, what's going to help you understand if webinars are successful is if they drive pipeline. So whether that's looking at opportunities in Salesforce or Pipedrive or some other type of CRM, or looking at revenue and then attributing the people that may be in the contact role of that opportunity to the webinar campaign you have in Salesforce or the registration list if you're maybe not that robust with your CRM. That's what we like to look at a lot, because then we can say, all right, there's thousands of dollars that were generated from this webinar. I'm trying to get, with my marketing hat on now, anywhere from at least at a minimum 5 times return on my money. So if I'm going to spend, $3,000 on a webinar, I'd love to get at least $15,000 back. But what that will mean with close rates is that you need, let's say your close rates are anywhere from 10 to 20%. That means you need 5 to 10 times the amount of pipeline that you need to create in order to make sure that you actually hit that revenue number. So you need to do a little bit of math to better understand what that pipeline goal is, but that's ultimately going to help you figure out how you're going to make that webinar successful. So if you have more questions or follow-up questions on that, Sam, certainly feel free to reach out to me. My email is ben@interruptmedia.com, and we can take it offline and I can help further. So Jennifer asked, what factors should I consider when choosing a partner to co-market the webinar with me? I would say there's a couple things to consider. There's not really one silver bullet unless you know that somebody's got a really good list. Certainly that can certainly be a really good driving factor. They have a great list. That means there's bigger chances for folks to register and attend. You just got to make sure that list is going to be, again, in your target market of folks that you're trying to market and sell to. But aside from that, you really want to make sure that you have a good presenter, because it's not enough to just have folks show up. if you don't provide that good first impression and you don't provide value to folks on the webinar session, they're gonna discard you, and they're gonna not give you another chance. And so you can't control what somebody else is going to say, or not really control what somebody else is going to say. So I would say really the list, and then who you present with. Obviously the topic is important, and so if the two of you can kind of take different ways that you're approaching the problem that you're trying to solve on the webinar, I think that's great. But those would be the two things that I would think about. So great question. Sanjay asks, what should I consider when crafting my offer for webinar attendees? Good question. I think it's going to be different for everybody, and you have to kind of think about it with your team. I think we as a team, got together to kind of brainstorm what different offers may make the most sense. And it really depends on the kind of price points that you typically sell your products and services with, and what kind of value you can add with some type of offer. A lot of it's going to be dictated based off of the margins that you have with your products and services, and if you're okay with using something as a loss leader or some type of break even just to get people through the door. So I would say that's the kind of frame that you should be thinking about when you figure out what kind of offer you want to make. I mean, for us, we thought that this was an important offer to make because for a lot of you haven't done webinars before. And so we just figured that was going to be the case. And so we wanted to go ahead and give folks a lot of templates and checklists and stuff that they could just use right off, like immediately, so that it would save you a ton of time, because we find a lot that the bandwidth issue, I don't know how to do this, is what typically keeps people from acting on running webinars. So we figured if we could shorten that bandwidth by providing a bunch of the initial prep work, that would make sense, but it's not a less than $99 thing, because this is a ton of stuff. And so we were like, this is what we want to do, and it's a good opportunity for us to connect with folks that haven't necessarily heard us before. But we also, it's certainly about the money, because we want new clients. We want to help maintain and grow our business. Especially in a time like now where everybody, a lot of people are really struggling. We really want to also be able to do our part, because there are people that are in more need than we are. So hopefully that gives you a couple of different ways to look at it as you think about what that offer should be. But I would go back to the slide that I spoke to and figure out if free makes sense, pushing free white papers or ebooks and that sort of thing, or some type of low cost solution, or something that's under $1,000. Nice question. So Grace asks, how long should a webinar actually be, and how much time should somebody spend per slide? I've seen webinars be as short as 15 minutes. I've also seen webinars be as long as 90. I think anybody's not going to be able to give you more than an hour and a half of their time, and so you really want to make sure that you're picking the right amount of time. In terms of how long you should stay on slides, I think faster is better. But if you have a lot of really meaty content, then make sure it's on the slides, because a lot of times people won't watch the recording. They'll actually just look at slides and see what's there. So I'm kind of a big fan of having more on slides than less, but it's really up to you. And I would practice your cadence to see if it makes sense to do it. And one thing that I haven't necessarily suggested yet is do the webinars again. Like, if you're going to do the encore webinar, then that may help you, based off of feedback you get from the survey or the questions that you get, what makes more sense to spend more or less time on. But as you iterate, just like with any product or service, once you do it once, you learn about ways to make things better. Do it again. I know that marketing teams typically run a webinar and then go to the next webinar and go push the next thing. We really try to push people to think about ways to repurpose or redo or rerun webinars that they're getting really good success with, because in most cases, again, they're not getting their entire customer target list to show up. So why not keep trying to get folks to show up down the line when the timing's better or they're in a different position? So hopefully that answers your question. All right, I'm going to do the last question, and this one is from Callie. The question is, how much does it usually cost to outsource the production of a webinar? That's a great question. It's usually a couple grand. and most of the work is done in building out the slides because it really depends on the length of the webinar and what you want to say. But then there's also times to set up the landing page, the email sequences, the ad copy, setting up campaigns. Some of our clients ask us to run their ad campaigns for webinar registrations, and so it's usually a couple of grand. But again, if you can get a handful of folks to register and attend, the return on investment is extremely strong, and you can again repurpose the content as the recording or into other types of different assets as you choose. So I want to thank everybody so much for your time today. I really hope that this was a useful session for you. If you are interested in moving forward on the offer, again, please please email us at marketing@interruptmedia.com. If you just want to talk to us and learn more about how we may be able to help you execute webinars, please feel to reach out to me directly. My email is ben@interruptmedia.com. But if you need help with other content creation or demand gen, or you need help with your marketing automation or CRM tool, would love to speak with you as well. So thank you everybody so much. Please fill out the survey, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.